Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. We've got a short draft primer video for us here today. Rivals of Ixalan draft, coming back to Arena for about a week on Tuesday the 9th. And this is a set that's so old that if I'm not mistaken, I don't think we've actually drafted this set on Arena with other humans before. I think last time the set was out, which was like, 5, 6, 7 years ago, it was just with bots. And I also haven't made any content for this set before. It was a little bit before I started making content in general. So I figured, hey, it might be kind of fun to revisit the set. Hopefully it will be helpful for the folks looking to draft it this week. All right, so let's take a look at what's going on in this set, format at a glance. And before we get into actually the specifics of what's in this set, I think an important question to answer is this format good? Is it fun? Is it worth your time? It's only going to be out for a week, and learning a new set can kind of be a little bit intimidating, can kind of be a little bit cumbersome. I think that Rivals of Ixalan was one of the better draft formats of this era, kind of like the post-Khans of Tarkir, pre-Throne of Eldraine era of drafting. I don't think it's anything mind-blowing, and I'll also say that I think the formats of that era were on average a little bit worse than the formats we have today, but I would recommend drafting it if, one, you're kind of done with LCI and not really into cons, you just want a little bit of a different experience. Honestly, I think it being out for a week might be a benefit for it, because I think it's a really good format for the first, 15 or so drafts, then it gets a little bit repetitive, but the initial experience it offers is pretty good. I would also suggest, yes, you should draft this format if you're into creature type matters decks. We've got the 4 main creature types from Ixalan: vampires, merfolk, pirates, and dinos. That's very much what this set is about. There's a little bit of that, hints of that in Lost Caverns of Ixalan, but this is really the full, you really care about drafting these creature types kind of draft experience. So if you're into that, if you're into those kind of decks, I would recommend it. Something that might be pretty novel and maybe a little bit weird to people who only started drafting the past 5 years is Rivals of Ixalan is drafted 2 packs of Rivals of Ixalan and 1 pack of Ixalan. It used to be the case that, we had blocks where we'd have 2 or 3 sets in a row that were on the same plane, and you would actually end up drafting them together. This was the last one of that before they kind of moved to a different model. But you will open a Rivals of Ixalan pack to start with, and then another Rivals of Ixalan pack, and then an Ixalan pack, which has different cards, of course. So as we go through the cards today, I'm going to note when the cards are from Rivals and when the cards are for Ixalan. We're going to mostly be focusing on the Rivals cards, because, of course, you have 2 packs of that and only 1 pack of Ixalan. But also, if that sounds a little bit intimidating, or like, I have to learn 2 whole sets, don't worry too much, because as you're drafting your Rivals deck, and say you're in a vampire deck, or a dinosaur deck, or whatever, when you open your Ixalan pack, you're not looking through every single card in the pack and being like, oh, is that good? Is that good? Is that good? I mean, of course, if you have the time, it's great too. But really, if you're drafting a dinosaur deck, you can open your pack and be like, oh, okay, like I look at the dinosaur cards, see which one I want to take. Usually by the time you get to pack 3, you're already settled in a deck. So it's not like you have to take in every single card like you would if this was the second pack, for example. Then you might have to be a little more vigilant if it was like Rivals of Ixalan, Ixalan, Rivals of Ixalan. Here it's more just like, all right, once I open my Ixalan pack, I kind of know what I'm already doing. Okay, so let's get into a few more specifics here. Another really good thing about this format is that it's pretty pick up and play. Like, it's not that complex. You're going to understand what's going on. These days they really just jam-pack sets with multiple themes and sub-themes and, like, secret decks. In this format, you're going to understand 80% of what's going on here if you're just focusing on these 4 creature types that matters: the pirates, the vampires, the merfolks, and the dinosaurs. There's a few other things here and there. There's like a blue-white control flyer deck that we're going to talk about as we get into it. But really, if you're like, oh, a whole new set and I've only got a week to learn it, the macro level stuff of what's going on here is all pretty straightforward. The mechanics in this set are also pretty straightforward. Also, there's just not that many mechanics, and a lot of them are ones we've seen pretty recently, so you should be familiar with them. The one sort of like a little bit more complex one is Ascend, or the City's Blessing. And all this is you'll have cards that say Ascend, and they say if you control 10 or more permanents, you get this City's Blessing for the rest of the game, which is just this emblem which you just have. And if you have the City's Blessing, your Ascend cards get better. So we have Tendershoot Dryad here, one of the best cards in the set. This thing's gonna pump out 1/1s, and then if you have the City's Blessing, they get +2/+2. So you pump them, and of course, making 1/1s gets you to 10 permanents. And note, it's 10 permanents, not non-land permanents. One of the big things that we learned as we played the set for the first time is it's really not that difficult to get to 10. A lot of people kind of assumed this would be like a really late game thing, like, okay, like 10 permanents is so many, but 5 lands in play, plus a few creatures, maybe you've got a few tokens lying around, maybe you've got a treasure or 2. It's really not that hard. And another thing that you might be wondering, once you have 10 permanents, you're always going to have the City's Blessing for the rest of the game. You can't lose the City's Blessing if you go below 10 permanents. Next up, we have Enrage, which is a pretty simple mechanic. This is the dinosaur mechanic, and Enrage says when this creature has been dealt damage, you get the effect. So with Frill Deathbidder here, it's pretty small, deal 2 damage to the opponent, but Of course, as you go higher rarities, you get some really good ones. And the idea with Enrage is basically just like, it punishes your opponent for blocking. You know, you're playing this red-green smashy deck, and your opponent kind of needs to block a lot of the time, but then gets punished for doing so. But on top of that, there's also a lot of pinging effects, 1 damage effects in this set. I wouldn't play something like Shake the Foundations just because you have a few Frill Death Spitters, but if you have some of those higher rarity ones, or some of these cards like Raging Regisaur, like these are just good cards on their own and incidentally trigger Enrage. So yeah, not really something you're building around, more just something to be aware of. And when you read something that says, oh, I deal 1 damage, you're gonna know, okay, that goes with the Enrage cards. Next up, we've got the Pirate mechanic, which is Raid. And if you played Konzatar here, you'll know this one. Raid is very simple. It just says, if you've attacked this turn, you get this bonus or this ability or whatever it is on the card. And kind of just like in Rage, you're not building your entire deck around this. It's just more something that you might have a concession to here and there. And some things that you might in a good Raid deck is just a good curve of creatures. If you don't have a 2-drop on 2, if you don't have a 3-drop on 3, it just means that all your Raid cards are going to get a little bit worse because you're not going to get the bonus. The Siren Reaver, for example, here, you're going to have to play it on turn 4 instead of turn 3. That's a pretty big deal. And the other thing with Raid is flying gets a little bit better, right? Any evasion so you can keep attacking and not have to send, like, your small things in to their death to just trigger Raid. That's going to be pretty good. And there are quite a few good cheap evasive creatures in this set. And then the last mechanic we're all very familiar with, and that's Explore. Explore is pretty prevalent in this set, and there's actually a few payoffs for exploring. There's this weird thing in this set. The way this set is constructed, normally, you know, we have the 10 color pairs where it's like, okay, well, blue-red's doing this and green-blue's doing that. And you have that in Ixalan too. But if you just map all the color pairs onto the creature types, which is how they kind of came up with those color pairs, you get, okay, vampires are black-white, merfolk are blue-green, pirates take up the Grixis shard, and dinos take up the Naya shard. The problem with that, though, is that you have 2 color pairs that just aren't represented there. You have blue-white, which we're going to get to in a little bit, and we have black-green, and they kind of seeded black-green as this, like, exploring deck that it didn't really get there. I don't think really you should be building, like, an explore deck, quote-unquote, but there is one card, and these are in the Ixalan packs, Wild Growth Walker. This card's really, really strong, really good payoff for having a bunch of explore cards. Not really something you can, like, take and then build around, because by the time you got into pack 3, you kind of have enough explore cards, or you don't. But just wanted to point out Wild Growth Walker as a actual good payoff for this, like, black-green explore deck that was supposed to be there. And of course, you don't have to be black-green. You can be green anything. All right, let's get into some archetypes now. And just a forward of how I'm laying this out. For each archetype, I'm going to talk about the cards in order of the Rivals of Ixalan cards first, because that's where you're starting, and that's where you have 2 packs. And then we'll get to the Ixalan Pack 3 cards. I think that might just be a little bit easier to parse things and to learn things. So starting off with what I think is the best deck, Vampires, black-white Vampires. Not only does this deck have a lot of great cards at common, uncommon, rare, but black and white, I believe, are the deepest colors in the Rivals of Ixalan packs. So not only do you get a lot of good payoffs, good commons, but you're just in good colors in general. Vampires in this set is sort of what I would call, like, aggressive with some grind. You're not kind of the aggro deck where you're going 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop, attack you, combat trick, kill you. Sometimes you do that once in a while, but it's more like, all right, I'm going to slowly build up my board, have my Legion Lieutenant pump my things, maybe have a mass pump spell after I built out a wide board, and you can kind of see that game plan in action here with 2 of the better commons for the deck, Dusk Legion Zealot and Legion Conquistador. Dusk Legion Zealot, just your classic 2-mana creature, draws a card when it enters, just a good card. Legion Conquistador is a really fun one, actually. This is a collect 'em all, so you want to have as many of these cards as you possibly can. And the cool thing is that you would think, okay, well, there's 2 packs of Rivals, 1 packs of Ixalan. You're only going to get 2 packs of Legion Conquistadors to pick from. But they thought of that, and Ixalan also has this card as well. So you actually have 3 full packs to pick up your Legion Conquistadors. I wouldn't, like, first pick these, second pick these all that often, but if you see an early Legion Conquistador, like say you took a rare, pick one, pack 1, but you noted there was a Legion Conquistador in the pack 2, you see you on pack 5, I'm going to take that Legion Conquistador because there's a decent chance you get that other Conquistador back on the wheel. So something you definitely want to speculate on, and it wouldn't be the worst if you want to take one early either. Vampires has a light life game theme. It's not really like the center focus of this deck, but you have a few cards here and there that do pay you off for gaining life. And there's a lot of cards that just gain life incidentally. Some of the good ones here are Moment of Triumph and Moment of Craving. Moment of Craving, especially just good removal spell, 2 mana, -2, -2. You gain 2 life. Sometimes that 2 life also triggers something, but just that life swing is pretty nice. Either in this deck or just like any controlling deck's gonna love this card. And then kind of a sleeper here, Squire's Devotion. And this isn't specifically a Vampires card, but it does make a vampire, so it makes it even better in the Vampires deck. This is a really strong card, one of the better commons in the format, and probably one that you're gonna get late. I imagine not a ton of people are gonna have this card on their radar going in, and it doesn't look like the most amazing card in the world, but the way this plays out is like, you play a 1-drop, You stick this on, your 2/2 attacks as a 3/3 lifelink, probably past your opponent's thing, and you have a 1/1 sticking back. Maybe that 1/1 even threatens to trade against, imagine if their turn 2 play was a 2/1, right? You play a 2/2, play Squire's Devotion, attack for 3, they can't block. Another 2/1 can't really attack back because you have a 1/1 lifelink. So just a really strong card. Also pretty good in blue-white, just putting it on a flyer or something. Not one I think you're going to have to take that early, but I wouldn't be sad to and be very happy about it when you get one on the wheel, because I think people are going to undervalue this one. All right, moving on to the Ixalan cards, the pack 3 cards you're looking for this vampire deck. Starting with the Signpost in common here, Call of the Feast, just a really good card. 4 mana, make 3 1/1 lifelinking vampire tokens. And remember, these don't stay 1/1s for long. There's a lot of ways to pump them. Not just Legion Lieutenant like we saw in the first pack, but just a lot of cards in general that'll pump your vampires. Some 2-drops here, one of the best ones of all time in Limited, honestly, a real banger. Adonto Vanguard, 2 mana for a basically indestructible 3/1 attacks. Your opponent can never block this thing. You imagine putting a Squire's Devotion, the aura, on this card. That's just a 1/2 punch that your opponent needs a bounce spell or something that exiles to get rid of this thing. Really just like one of the grown tests of the format. And Bishop Soldier, so 2 mana 2/2 lifelink, gonna be a good deal. Of course, that 4 life on a Adonto Vanguard seems like a lot, but the joke here is you have lifelink in your vampire deck. You're not gonna care that much about paying for life. A few other ones as you go up the curve. Anointed Deacon. This is one that actually was quite a sleeper back in the day too. Looks a little clunky, like a 5 mana 3/3, or a pump 1 thing. The way your vampire deck plays out a lot of the time is like you kind of get into this board stall where you've got a lot of things and you're just looking for a way to get those things in. And this Deacon sends those things in one at a time. We have a 1/1 lifelink token. You go, all right, attack is a 3/1, and your opponent's like, I guess I have to block that thing. And the next thing you go, attack with my other 3/1 lifelinker, and it just gets really annoying, really hard for your opponent to grind through. Paladin of the Bloodstained, great card, just 4 mana, 3/2, comes with the 1/1 lifelink token, and Skymarsh Bloodletter, just a pretty good card too. A Windrake that drains your opponent on entry. So all in all, this vampire deck, very versatile, has just a lot of good cards in all 3 packs. Pretty hard to go wrong with this one, and I think vampires can support like 2 to 3 people at the table. So even if you think you're like, you might not be that open, it's probably still a fine deck to draft. All right, that's going to bring us to our next archetype here, blue-green Merfolk. And this was, I think, the best deck in Triple Ixalan. It got a little bit worse in Rivals just because the Merfolk cards weren't quite as pushed as they were in Triple Ixalan, but still a pretty good deck where Vampires is the kind of attrition-y aggro deck where you're building out a board and then pumping those creatures slowly. Merfolk's the next step up for aggro, where it just wants to stick a threat, it wants to grow that threat, it wants to pump its creatures, it wants to just kill you as fast as possible. Sort of like a blue-green tempo deck, you can think of it in some ways. You want to play like a Mistcloak Herald on turn 1 into a Merfolk Mistbinder. Some of the best commons for their Merfolk deck in the Rivals of Ixalan packs are Jungle-Born Pioneer and Crashing Tide. Unfortunately, they're so good that you're going to get them poached by just the other blue and green drafters. The blue-white drafter is going to take Crashing Tide pretty happily. Of course, it gets better for the Merfolk deck, but it's not a bad card in another deck. It's not a bad thing that you get these good cards in your deck, but it doesn't mean that you're going to have to take them maybe a little bit higher than some other decks have to take their cards. Moving to the Ixalan cards that you want for this deck, because there really aren't that many Rivals of Ixalan cards. I kind of touched on most of them. Shapers of Nature, the Signpost in common here. Just good value card, 3 mana 3/3. You can pump your creatures, you can draw some cards. We've got Kumada Speaker as a good 1-drop. Tempest Caller is a pretty cool one. Just a nice little finisher, tap all your opponent's stuff. And then what really made this deck great is just a lot of really good uncommons here. River Sneak, Merfolk Branchwalker as I think the best non-rare explore creature. Vineshaper Mystic. If you're playing this in a Merfolk deck, you're getting like 3/5 worth of stats for 3 mana, which is just phenomenal. And then we have the one with the wind Jade Guardian combo, which was the bane of Triple Ixalan. Really just like kind of a sicko combo. Both these cards are playable in your Merfolk decks, just cheap aura, +2/+2 and flying for 2 mana, really good. Jade Guardian, definitely a little bit less good, but just 4 mana creature that pumps one of your other creatures. The combo, of course, just you put a 1 with the wind on your Jade Guardian, and you attack for 5 hexproof each turn. And then the hits don't stop coming. We got River Herald's Boon. It's just a great combat trick. It's a +1/+1, 2 different places, or +2/+2, 1 place. And of course, you get to keep the counters around. So you win the combat, and then your creatures are just bigger for the next combat. It's just like a smattering of good creatures here and there. Water Weaver Trapper, just kind of like your Frost Lynx, tap a thing down, it doesn't untap kind of card. Deshaunna's Wayfinder, another pretty good Merfolk. I think out of all the decks, this is the one that we really get paid out for in pack 3. So it's not going to be a deck you move into all that often in the first 2 packs, but sometimes you just end up, okay, well, you got a 4th pick golden common or something, and then the blue and green cards are coming to you, and then you just know, okay, this lane's kind of open, and I'm going to get the good cards passed to me in pack 3. It's going to bring us to Grixis Pirates. So like I mentioned before, we've got Pirates and Dinosaurs, and they cover 2 shards. So there's actually 3 decks for each of them that play a little bit differently than each other. With Pirates here, we've got kind of a spectrum of aggression where red-blue is the most aggressive. It just really wants to attack every single turn, enable raid. Red-black is kind of like aggressive, mid-rangey, but a little slower. And blue-black, which is a little more like tricksy, not super aggro, like playing some early, maybe, not defense necessarily, but it's going to play a little bit of a longer game. Deadeye Brawler here is kind of indicative of that, as it wants you to get to Ascend and wants you to have the City's Blessing. The cheap commons you find for the Pirates decks in the Rivals packs are all pretty good. We've got Goblin Trailblazer and Kitesail Corsair as 2 good evasive 2-drops. Fanatical Firebrand as a good 1-drop, and this is before 1-drops were just generically good, and you'll actually find a lot of kind of not so great 1-drops in the set, but Firebrand is actually a pretty good one. And then for the kind of slower Pirates deck, Sailor of Means, really, really great card. This is actually one of the cards that's in all 3 packs. There's a few cards they did, not just with the Legion Conquistador, but Sailor of Means, and I think also Colossal Dreadmaw, which we're going to get to when we talk about dinosaurs. But yeah, Sailor of Means, really nice one, just good defense, helps you splash. Anything that makes 2 permanents, as we know, is pretty good. This is one of those things that in 2023, we know it's like, makes 2 things, that's a good thing. But we didn't all know that in 2017. I think a lot of people underrated this card for a long time. This is one of Ethan, Lord Tupperware's favorite cards, and I like this card a lot too. It just kind of does everything your slower blue decks want. For the faster decks though, Buccaneer's Bravado, really nice combat trick. Easy to overlook too, but it's a 2-mana +1/+1 double strike to your Pirates. And if anybody's played with a double strike trick before, especially one that gives a bonus, you'll know this can just kill out of nowhere, right? You have a 4-power creature that goes unblocked, well, suddenly your opponent's taking 10 damage. And then moving on to the cards you're looking for from the Ixalan pack. So I just want to point out for these 3 signposts here, the blue-red and the black-red one are both pretty good. The black-blue one can be good, but it's not as generically good as the other 2. You really kind of need to have a lot of treasure, otherwise this is just like a 5-mana 3/3. I mean, maybe you have an equipment here or there, but it's not something to get excited about. Definitely something that you'll want to wheel rather than pick up 3rd pick or something. A pair of really nice uncommons here. Siren Storm Tamer, which you might be familiar with because it sees some constructed play, and Lightning Rig Crew. This is another one that's probably a little bit weird to look at if you haven't seen it before. There's the card Thermo Alchemist that, it's kind of this for spells. 2-mana 0/3 that you can tap to deal damage when you cast a instant or sorcery untaps. This is the same kind of thing, although giving it a 5th toughness really, really makes this a great blocker. So you can kind of think of this as a 1/5 vigilant unblockable creature that has pirate, care about pirates, and sometimes it'll be like a 4/5 or a 3/5 or something if you can cast a bunch of pirates in the same turn. Much better than it looks if you haven't seen one of these kind of cards before. And then for the commons on the Ixalan packs, not a ton of things you're looking for, honestly. The pirate commons are not great. Fathom Fleet Firebrand is a pretty good one, though. I always remember this one overperforming. Trades up, good 2-drop, and Pirate's Cutlass. This is one that, out of all the equipment that we've had in Limited in the past 10 years, this is probably like top 10 common ones or something like that. It's a really good one. The auto-equip on your Pirates is really strong. I don't think I'd mind playing 2 of these in decks with a lot of Pirates, especially if you have the evasive Pirates. All right, our next archetype here, the one everybody's been waiting for, I'm sure, is Dinosaurs. And just like Pirates, we've got a spectrum of aggression to slower deck. Red-White is the fastest Dinosaur deck. Then we have Green-Red as the aggressive mid-range deck, sort of like it is in Caverns of Ixalan. And then there's green-white slower ramp, which wasn't a deck you drafted very often. It was like a once-in-a-blue moon thing. The signpost here, as you can see, are really strong. Just a 3-mana mana dork that can buy back a dino from the grave. This is a good payoff / enabler for the deck, but a lot more of the cards kind of just push you to attack rather than to ramp. It's more of a higher rarity thing. I think if you have like some expensive rares, you can lean into the green-white side of things, but mostly when you're drafting dinosaurs, you're going to focus on the red decks. Some pretty nice uncommons in the Rivals of Ixalan packs, and including Thrashing Brontodon, which has since made an appearance, but Crested Herd Caller, 5 mana for 2/3/3 trample is really good. Needletooth Raptor is just this card that just says, yo, come at me, bro. And you know, it's really good when it comes down because your opponent can't really attack into it. And then when you untap, if you have any pinging effects, you can just really go off, right? Like ping this thing, kill a creature, maybe even instant speed ping effect you do on your opponent's turn. Because I mean, you could do it on your turn too, but this will die because it's only a 2/2. So a better card than it looks, I think. If it looks like a little bit out of place in a red aggro deck, maybe it's not like the most smashy smash card, but it is a powerful card. So if you're more in that like red-green, sort of mid-rangey, sort of aggressive space, this is definitely a card you're looking for. Quite powerful. And of course, we've got Colossal Dreadmaw in all 3 packs. And yeah, this is actually a good card. Back in the day, just big ol' 6/6 vanilla trample creature. These days, we expect our 6/6 tramplers to draw us a bunch of cards, of course, but definitely a card that you weren't sad to play. I do want to call out Tillinolli's Crown as a pretty good Enrage enabler. This is a card that I think is going to fly under the radar. So you're paying 2 mana to trigger Enrage, and then give your Dino +3/+0 and Trample. So it's not like an aura that'll help your creature attack all that much better in a lot of spots, but it does push a lot of damage while sometimes triggering a Enrage ability. I wouldn't really play this unless you had a lot of Enrage cards, but if you did, it's a pretty good card. And then some of the white dinos here that are good in slower decks, but actually better in the aggressive decks than you might think. Snubhorn Sentry is a 1 mana 0/3 that if you've gotten 10 permanents, it becomes a 3/3. And this card looks a little bit strange, a little bit like kind of dorky, but it turns on pretty quickly. And just investing 1 mana on turn 1 and then later turning that into a 3/3, it's a lot better than it sounds. And then we've got Sun-Crested Pterodon, the chicken as it was called back in the day. Another card that looks a little bit dorky, but this 2/5 Vigilant Body blocks everything all day, and this thing just always demanded a removal spell because it stopped you from attacking and pecked away at you for 2 points. No pun intended, but pecked away at you for 2 points a turn. Another one you could probably get pretty late because I don't think people are going to respect this card. And then we move to the Ixalan pack, and the Ixalan packs definitely gave the dinos a lot of love. So we've got Sky Terror as just a pretty good early cheap creature. Raging Swordtooth, this one's a monster. So it comes down, sometimes sweeps your opponent's board and also triggers your Enrage. Like, there's some matchups that just can't beat this card or have an extremely tough time with this card. On the flip side, green-white signpost here, Belligerent Bronzodon. This made my top 10 worst signposts on Commons top 10 list I made last week. So just stay away from this one. It's just not really something you want to do. 7 mana, 6/6 that has a what amounts to a minor ability. Not very good. A good 7-drop, though, is Thundering Spineback. Just a large creature that pumps all your other dinos, and there's just like a really good mana sink pumping out 4/4s each turn. Imperial Aerosaur, one of the better cards you can have for your aggressive dino decks. Ranging Raptor is one of the better ones for your slower, more rampy dino decks, but also just like a fine card most places. And then at uncommon here, we have 2 good mana ramp creatures. One that hastes out your dinos, and one that gets bigger when you have a dinosaur. Savage Stomp is a really efficient removal spell, and Snapping Sailback is a cool one. Just comes in, eats something usually, is a 5/5, really annoying to deal with. And there's not a ton of amazing cards for the dinosaur decks at common, but we've got Territorial Hammerskull, often imitated, never duplicated though. This is the best version of this card we've had, just coming down on 3, having 3 toughness. The problem with these cards usually, or I won't even say problem, but the fix to these cards, because this card I think was a little too good, is usually they give these when I attack tap something cards low toughness these days, like 1 or 2 toughness. 3 toughness means that it's really hard to get rid of this thing because they're going to tap down your best thing every combat, which then means that it's less likely that they can trade for a 2/3. And even if they can trade for a 2/3, that means your other creatures are getting in a lot of damage. So just really a great card, and you should just play as many copies as you can. So that does it for the 4 creature type decks. I want to bring your attention to the cycle of Forerunners at uncommon here. All pretty strong cards. They all go in search for a creature type of their type and put them on top of your library. So the Forerunner of the Coalition goes and gets a Pirate. The Forerunner of the Heralds go and gets a Merfolk. I want to bring your attention to Forerunner of the Empire specifically, though, because of the combo between it and Needletooth Raptor. Because what happens here is whenever you have a Needletooth Raptor in play and a Forerunner in play, every dinosaur you cast will deal 5 damage to something. And of course, the nice little 1/2 punch is your Forerunner goes and finds the Raptor, and the next turn you play the Raptor and you immediately get to kill something. So just a really nice combo to look out for. And then the last deck here that I do think is good to talk about is Blue-White Ascend. So this is sort of like a slower, flying, control-y deck. It really does want to get to turn 10 permanents to turn on all of its Ascend cards. All of the Ascend cards are pretty good, by the way. Like, I think a pretty good rule of thumb is if it says Ascend, it's going to be a pretty solid card. There's only like 1 or 2 exceptions. You know, you're playing your Snubhorn Sentries into your interaction spells, maybe casting a Secrets of the Golden City, which is a 3 mana, draw 3 at common if you've got the City's Blessing. So you're really just trying to like chill for a bit. And then once you get to 10 permanents, all of your cards turn on, they get better. So you're just trying to control the game until that point. And I'll also note the Soul of the Rapids Squire Devotion combo, which I don't think Soul of the Rapids is a great card. It's a passable one. You could play it. But if you've got like 2 Squire's Devotions, I definitely would play my first copy of Soul, because just sticking a Squire's Devotion on a Soul of the Rapids, having a flying 4-power hexproof lifelink creature, that's just going to win a ton of games. Some single cards to call out as we wrap up here. Ketsamok, Primal Death. one of the best limited bombs of all time. One of the most annoying bombs to play against too, because the way this plays is your opponent has a Texamok and they reveal it on turn 2 or turn 3. They mark your creature, and then just the rest of the game, they just go, okay, reveal Texamok, reveal Texamok. Now, of course, if they're spending mana to not affect the board, that gives you a little bit of wiggle room, some leverage to be able to kill them before the Texamok comes down. But there are some spots where you're just like, well, I don't really have that much pressure, and this Texamok's going to come down in a turn or two. What am I supposed to do? Like, you do have to keep playing creatures, I think, if you want to beat this thing. I don't think the strategy is generally hold back all your creatures. If they're like turn 5 and they're just about to cast Texamok, yeah, I definitely hold back some creatures. But the thing you want to do is put enough pressure on so that they're forced to cast it. Because if your strategy is like, okay, I'm just not going to play my creatures, they're going to be like, okay, cool. I'm just going to chill for a little bit longer. You've given me the time now to not need to cast the Texamok, and they can just cast their other spells. So you are still priced into casting your creatures unless you've already got enough pressure. Like if you can see the end is in sight, I can kill them in 2 turns with just what I have on board. Sure, you don't have to play into it, but it's pretty difficult to be in a game state where that's true. And then for the Ixalan pack, Settle the Wreckage, which is frankly a traumatizing card once you get gotten by it once. Because once you get gotten by it once, you're like, I've got lethal, I attack all, and they Settle the Wreckage you. You're going to be thinking about this card every single time you go for a big attack, even in other formats. True, like obviously in this format, I think people that have played against this card can probably empathize with this feeling of just like, you're playing any format and you're like, okay, I'm going to attack all. Wait, should I not attack all? No, there's no reason not to attack all. Your Settle the Wreckage is not in this format. You'll even hear people joking about like, oh, maybe you should play around Settle, even though it's in, some completely different format. So just be aware, if your opponent's playing kind of sketchy, they pass the turn with 4 mana up, they haven't done anything yet, you attack. Yeah, you might want to play around it here or there. Ravenous Chupacabra, an iconic card. Back in the day, they used to call these cards Flame Tongue Kavus, things that come in and kill something. But now, if you talk to somebody who started Magic in the past 5 years, they'll probably refer to this kind of card as a Ravenous Chupacabra. So a really iconic card, and really powerful card too, right? Nothing to really complain about, just 4 mana, 2/2, kills a thing. Sometimes you can recur it, buy it back. Really great card. And the last card I want to call out here is a little bit of an oddball, but it's Curious Obsession. And this looks like Curiosity, which is of course what the name is referring to, and Curiosity, which is just this card but not giving the +1/+1, is a substantially worse card, and this card is substantially better. That +1/+1 might not seem like a lot, but one of the problems with Curiosity is like, okay, I stick my Curiosity on my creature and it still can't attack better. Sure, you could put it on a flyer or something, but the thing about Curious Obsession is you put this on your 2/2, now attacks past your opponent's 2/2, you at least get a card out of the deal. You've got that last line of text here that if you didn't attack, you have to sacrifice Curious Obsession, but even if you get 1 hit in, you've gotten your card back and you've got 2 hit in, you've drawn 2 cards for 2 mana, which is just fantastic. And of course, you can still do that thing where you slap this on a flyer, your flyer gets a little bit bigger, and you start going to town with it. So a pretty high pick. All right, so that's going to do it for our short, I say short, but short by my standards, maybe, our short draft primer for Rivals of Ixalan. I hope you got around to drafting this set, because like I said, I do actually think this was a pretty good execution of the creature types matters theme that they kind of go for. So if you're looking for more of that Ixalan flavor and theme, I would recommend checking it out. All right, hope you enjoyed this. Thank you for watching and listening, and we'll see you next time.